Have you ever gone quiet on a woman and watched her change? Like your silence hit her harder than anything you ever said. At first, it feels small. You just stop explaining, stop replying instantly, stop chasing the "are we okay" conversations. You don't block, you don't insult. You simply remove your energy from the room. And that's when you see it, the shift in her tone, the sudden curiosity, the little messages that feel like fishing hooks. Because she can handle anger. She can handle arguments. What she can't handle is losing access to you. Here's the disturbing truth. Your silence doesn't just annoy her. It removes emotional access. It removes the mirror she was using to measure herself. And when that mirror goes dark, her mind starts doing things you didn't expect. Later, we'll get into the deeper layer, why some women miss you and some women miss the power they had over you, and how your next reaction decides which one you're dealing with. Reason 1. Silence removes emotional access, and emotional access is a kind of power. When you used to respond fast, she had instant reassurance, instant attention, instant feedback. Even when she was wrong, even when she was cold, she could reset you with one message and feel the connection still existed. That's not love. That's access. And access is addictive because it's predictable. Silence cuts off that supply. It removes the comfort of knowing she can reach you anytime and get a reaction. Without your responses, she can't regulate her mood through your presence. She can't dump her anxiety into your inbox and watch it turn into reassurance. She can't throw a little distance at you and watch you chase. The absence of your energy makes the whole dynamic feel suddenly real. Not in a romantic way, in a consequences way. Here's the moment everything quietly changes. She realizes you're not upset, you're unavailable. There's a difference. An upset man still orbits. He still argues. He still explains. He still needs to be heard. An unavailable man doesn't. And the moment she feels that difference, her perception of your value can shift fast. Because what she thought was guaranteed suddenly isn't. Reason 2. No reaction breaks her control, because control usually comes from your predictability, not her strength. When a woman knows exactly how you'll respond, how fast you'll reply, how deeply you'll explain, how easily you'll be pulled into a mood, she doesn't need to try hard. She can steer the entire emotional climate with small actions. A late reply, a cold tone, a little breadcrumb, and you do the rest. But when you don't react, she can't measure her influence anymore. She can't trigger you and watch you bend. She can't use tests, drama, or emotional leverage to pull effort out of you. It exposes something painful, whether she wanted you or just your reactions. This is the part nobody talks about. Her usual tactics stop working when you stay calm. So she may escalate, not because she's evil, but because she's trying to regain footing. If sweetness doesn't get you, she tries guilt. If guilt doesn't get you, she tries irritation. If irritation doesn't get you, she tries nostalgia. Anything that forces you to show emotion, because emotion is proof. Proof that she still affects you. And here's the darker truth for you. The man she can't move becomes the man she starts respecting. Not because silence is magic, because silence tells her you have a center she can't access on demand. Here's the moment everything quietly changes again. Your silence makes her feel the imbalance she benefited from. When you stop being predictable, she has to deal with uncertainty. And uncertainty does something to the mind. Reason 3. The gap makes her mind spiral, because uncertainty makes the mind obsessive. A clean fight is easier for her than a quiet unknown. In a fight, she knows where she stands. She can label you mad, label herself right, and move on. But in silence, there's no label to hide behind. There's only a blank space, and her mind hates blank spaces. So she starts filling blanks with worst-case stories and hidden meanings. She replays your last conversation like it's evidence. She hears your last, "okay," in a different tone. She wonders if you detached before she did, and that stings. Because if you left emotionally first, it means she wasn't in control of the ending. The lack of closure makes her emotionally loop on you. The mind hates unanswered questions more than bad answers. A bad answer is painful, but it's solid. Silence is pain that moves. It shifts shape. 1 hour it feels like rejection. The next hour, it feels like punishment. The next hour, it feels like you've moved on. And the gap turns small memories into heavy evidence, because that's all she has to work with. This is why silence feels cruel even when you didn't do anything. It doesn't let her settle the narrative. She spirals because she can't control the story anymore. Reason 4. She chases what she can't read, because mystery pulls attention. When you stop explaining, she starts imagining possibilities. When you stop narrating yourself, you become harder to access. And the brain always invests in what it can't immediately solve. She chases clarity when she can't predict your position. If she can't read you, she invests energy trying to decode you. She'll check your tone, your timing, your online status, your social signals. Not always consciously, but you'll feel it in how she reappears. Casual questions that aren't really questions, messages that don't need answers, little touches that are really probes. Unreadable men feel higher value because they don't seek approval. They don't rush to be understood. They don't collapse into explanations. Your silence forces her to come toward you for information. And the less you chase, the more she notices your absence. But here's the warning. The chase isn't always love. Sometimes it's her need to regain certainty. Sometimes she isn't chasing you. She's chasing control of the narrative. And that's why your calm matters more than your words. Here's the moment everything quietly changes. Your calm feels like rejection, because calm silence can feel colder than anger. Anger still proves you care. Calm suggests you're done. Reason 5. Your calm feels like rejection, and that's why she'll label you cold to pressure you back into reacting. Calm composure tells her she can't guilt you back into orbit. She can't comfort herself with your neediness, and that triggers ego pain, because ego wants to feel chosen, wanted, powerful, influential. Calm makes her feel replaceable, which she hates admitting. So she'll try to reframe your silence as a flaw. You're immature. You're playing games. You changed. The goal is simple, to make you defend yourself, because defense is engagement, and engagement is access. Your calm forces her to face the consequences without distraction. No fight to hide in, no drama to blame, no emotional chaos to make the relationship feel alive. Just a quiet reality. She did something, and now you're not compensating for it anymore. And the more steady you are, the more real the loss feels. That's why calm silence hurts more than loud anger. Loud anger keeps the connection alive. Calm silence lets the connection die. Reason 6. Silence turns you into a mystery, and mystery creates mental investment. Silence creates space, and space creates curiosity. When you stop narrating your thoughts, you seem deeper and harder to access. She starts paying attention because she can't assume your availability. And assumption is what kills value. Mystery makes her mind work, and mental effort builds attachment. Not always healthy attachment, but attachment. Your quiet suggests self-respect, not emotional dependence. It makes her wonder what you're doing, and who else sees you. It makes her wonder if she misread you as a man who would always be there. Silence also stops you from over-explaining, which is where most men lose attraction without noticing. Over-explaining is you begging to be understood. Silence is you choosing yourself over approval. And that shift, whether you mean it or not, changes how she sees you. But silence doesn't end the dynamic. It triggers the next move. Here's the moment everything quietly changes again. She tests if you still care, because a random message is often a probe for access, not a confession. Reason 7. She tests if you still care, and the test is simple. Will the old dynamic still work? She tests your response speed, because speed is a signal. If you respond fast, you signal you're still reachable, still movable, still available. She can still reset the connection with one message, so she sends breadcrumbs to pull you back without risking rejection. A casual, hey, a meme, a question with no weight. If you respond immediately and warmly, she learns she can still control the connection. And once she learns she still can, the urgency fades. She doesn't need to change. She doesn't need to be accountable. She only needed proof you were still there. If you don't respond, she may escalate sweetness, guilt, or drama. Not because she's insane, because she's trying to force a response and regain certainty. The real question behind the test is always the same. Do I still affect him? And her tests reveal whether she misses you or misses the power. How you respond decides whether she respects you or uses you. If you fold, you teach her silence was temporary. If you hold steady, you teach her a new rule. Access is earned. Now, up to this point, it's easy to think this is all about her psychology, her tests, her ego, her need for certainty. But the real story, the one that decides whether your silence is strength or just another game, has nothing to do with her. Here's the inward flip, and it's going to make you uncomfortable. Most men can go silent, but they can't stay silent. Because silence reveals their addiction. The addiction to being chosen. The addiction to reassurance. The addiction to knowing they still matter to her. Your silence looks calm on the outside, but inside you're refreshing your phone, checking if she viewed your story, replaying what you last said, wondering if she's replacing you. And the moment she sends that breadcrumb, your nervous system lights up like a starving man smelled food. So ask yourself the honest question. Are you silent because you're detached? Or because you're waiting for her to come back and validate you? Because if you're silent to get a reaction, you're still controlled. You've just changed costumes. You're still letting her decide whether you feel powerful today. You're still using her attention to regulate your worth. And women can feel that hunger even when you don't speak. It leaks through the moment you finally respond. Too fast. Too warm, too eager, like you were holding your breath. This is why silence is so dangerous for a man who doesn't have a center. It gives him the illusion of power while he's still begging internally. He starts using silence like a weapon, then collapses the second she pushes back, because he wasn't standing on standards, he was standing on hope. And if that's you, then her tests aren't the problem. Your need is, because the man who truly hurts them with silence isn't the man who's trying to punish. It's the man who genuinely doesn't need access anymore. The man who can read a message and not feel his chest tighten. The man who can let her sit in uncertainty without rushing to rescue her. The man who can let the gap exist without filling it with explanation. And the only way to become that man is to see what you've been avoiding. You don't fear losing her. You fear the emptiness you feel when you're not being chosen. That emptiness is what makes you chase. That emptiness is what makes you over-explain. That emptiness is what makes you accept crumbs, tolerate disrespect, stay in mixed signals, and call it patience. And until you face that, your silence will never be real. It will always be a pause before the next chase. In the next part, we're going to go colder. Why closure hurts more than anger. How detachment makes you look valuable for reasons you didn't expect, and what happens when your silence forces the truth out of her. Because the moment you stop reacting, the relationship can no longer hide behind noise. It has to show what it really is. And most men aren't ready for what gets revealed when they finally stop speaking. Because what gets revealed isn't just her intentions, it's their own desperation. The part of them that has been negotiating dignity for attention for years. And once you see that part clearly, you either keep feeding it or you cut it off. And that's when the silence stops being a tactic and becomes a turning point, because it stops being about what she feels and becomes about what the silence exposes. Reason 8. Detachment makes you look valuable, but not in the way most men think. It's not playing hard to get. It's something colder. You're no longer performing for access. When you detach, you stop broadcasting need, and need is what makes a man easy to handle. A woman can ignore a needy man and know he'll still be there. She can be inconsistent and know he'll still chase. She can test him and know he'll still explain. Detachment breaks that comfort. It tells her, without a single word, that your attention is not a public resource. That's why the shift is so fast. Your silence reads like self-respect. And self-respect is rare because most men leak their hunger in every reply. They respond too fast. They write too much. They show their cards too early. They turn every interaction into an audition. When you stop doing that, you stop looking like a man asking to be chosen. You start looking like a man who chooses. And here's the darker part. The moment you look like a man who chooses, she starts wondering who else might choose you too. Not because she's jealous by nature, because scarcity changes perception. It forces the mind to update the value of what it can't easily access. You become harder to read, harder to reach, harder to keep. And that uncertainty can create interest where comfort killed it. But don't romanticize that interest. Sometimes she's drawn to the strength. Sometimes she's disturbed by the loss of control. Those two look identical at first. That's why detachment is dangerous for a man who still craves validation. Because when she finally reaches out, your ego wants to treat it like proof you won. And that's when you lose again. Here's the moment everything quietly changes. You realize detachment only works when it's real. If you're silent to manipulate, you will break your silence the second you feel her pulling away, and she will feel the hunger behind your calm. But if you're silent because you're genuinely done feeding a dynamic that drains you, she feels something she can't argue with. Finality. Reason 9. Closure hurts more than anger, because anger keeps the connection alive. Anger is still a conversation. Anger still gives her a role. Villain, victim, lover, enemy, anything. Anger still means she has access to your emotions. It still means she can trigger you and watch you move. Silence is different. Silence doesn't offer a role. Silence is the absence of a stage, and that's why it stings. It feels like rejection because it's not asking for her to respond. It's not trying to be understood. It's not begging to be seen. It's just a quiet wall. The mind hates that wall. It would rather fight than face emptiness. So she will often do anything to turn the wall back into a door. She'll send the soft message, then the casual message, then the, "Are you okay?" Then the guilt, then the irritation. Because if she can get you angry, at least she can locate you emotionally. She can say, "He's mad." She can place you somewhere. But calm silence can't be placed. Calm silence can't be negotiated with. Calm silence forces the one thing she avoids: the truth of what the connection actually was. If she was used to using your attention to regulate herself, silence becomes withdrawal. If she was used to having you as an option, silence becomes consequence. If she was used to being chased, silence becomes proof she can be lost. That's why closure, real closure, hurts more than anger. It removes the illusion that the dynamic is still open. It removes the fantasy that one message could reset everything. It makes her face what she did with access while she had it. And it also makes you face something. You've been using communication as a drug. You've been using contact to avoid feeling the loss. Silence forces you to finally feel the thing you've been dodging with words. That's why most men break it. They can't stand the discomfort. They'd rather have a toxic loop than clean emptiness. Here's a mini truth. If you can sit in silence without running back to her for relief, you stop being easy to play. Not because you became colder, because you stopped needing her to soothe you. Reason 10. Your silence forces the truth out. Because without noise, patterns become obvious. When you stop reacting, she has to show intention. When you stop explaining, she has to show effort. When you stop chasing, she has to decide whether she actually values you or just values access to you. Silence removes all the extra material that hides the real relationship. No more back and forth. No more, "Let's talk." No more emotional bargaining. No more reassurance on tap. Just actions. If she reaches out with weight, real accountability, real consistency, real effort, you see it. And you don't have to decode it. If she reaches out with bait, random messages, nostalgia, half-warmth designed to reopen the line, you see that too. Silence makes the difference impossible to ignore. This is why some women get nicer when you go quiet, and some get uglier. The nice ones are moving toward you with intention. The ugly ones are trying to provoke you back into the old dynamic. The nice ones can handle not being in control. The ugly ones can't. And this is where men get confused, because both types will reach out. Both types will show movement. Both types will suddenly become curious. The difference is what happens when you don't reward it immediately. A woman with real intention will sustain effort even when you're not instantly available. A woman with control issues will fade the moment she senses she has access again. So the silence isn't the punishment, it's the filter. It forces the truth out of her, and it forces the truth out of you, because now you have to confront what you actually want. Do you want to be chosen, or do you want to be respected? Do you want attention, or do you want a real bond? Do you want the high of her chasing, or do you want stability that doesn't require games? Here's the final descent, and it's the part most men hate because it's not about female psychology. It's about male weakness that hides inside pride. If your silence is hurting them, it's because your presence was doing something for them. It was feeding their ego, calming their insecurity, giving them a safety net, providing emotional labor. And when you remove that, they feel exposed. But if your silence is hurting you, it's because your presence was doing something for you, too. It was feeding your need to be chosen. It was calming your fear of being replaceable. It was giving you a role, the fixer, the loyal one, the man who stays. And when you remove that, you feel empty. So the question isn't, should I be silent? The question is, can I handle what silence reveals? Because silence reveals whether you were loved or used. It reveals whether you were desired or convenient. It reveals whether she misses you or misses the power. And it reveals whether you can stand alone without crawling back to the first person who makes you feel wanted again. That's why the most dangerous moment isn't when she goes quiet. It's when she breaks your silence. That first message, that first probe, that first breadcrumb that wakes your nervous system up. If you respond like a starving man, you teach her that silence was just a tantrum. You teach her there's no real consequence. You teach her you're still available for the same dynamic, just in a slightly different mood. But if you respond like a man who can take or leave access, you change the entire game without saying a word. You don't reward vagueness with depth. You don't reward breadcrumbs with availability. You don't reward tests with emotion. You stay clean. You stay slow. You stay decided. And that doesn't mean you become cruel. It means you stop being cheap. Because that's what a lot of men are, and they don't know it. Cheap with their time. Cheap with their attention. Cheap with their emotional labor. They donate themselves until they resent the donation. Then they call women selfish when women accept what was freely given. Silence is the first time a man stops donating. But to keep it, you need something stronger than silence. You need standards. You need a life that doesn't collapse when one woman doesn't respond. You need a center that doesn't require her approval to feel stable, because if you don't build that center, you'll break your silence for the wrong reasons. You'll break it to relieve your anxiety. You'll break it to win. You'll break it to feel powerful for a minute. And then you'll be right back in the cycle, wondering why the same women keep treating you the same way. So let's make it cold and simple. If your silence is hurting them more than you think, it's because they were comfortable with your access. They were comfortable with your predictability. They were comfortable with your reaction. And comfort kills respect when comfort costs nothing. The moment you remove yourself, you force the truth. Either they step up with real intention, or they reveal they only wanted what you provided. And you have to be strong enough to accept whichever truth shows up. Because the real power of silence isn't making her miss you, it's making you stop begging. If this made you see something you were avoiding, you already know what to do.